What really happened to Lynette Hooker, and did her husband Brian fake a boating accident to try and get away with murder? We're gonna piece together the evidence along with forensic psychology and behavioral analysis to find out. Now, let's get started.
Brian was interviewed for more than 3 hours, and at the end of that interview, authorities put him under arrest.
On Saturday, April 4th, 25-year married couple Brian and Lynette Hooker took their little 8-foot dinghy boat from their 50-foot sailboat to the Abaco Inn in the Bahamas to apparently drink.
Is it normal for them to go ashore, go to a restaurant, and then go back out to the boat?
Yeah.
Brian and Lynette have been living together on this boat for about 6 years, which was their all-year-round home, where they documented their perfect life and journey on social media.
Day 2 of crossing the Gulf of Mexico.
We are crossing the Gulf of Mexico.
And Brian found the speaker. Do the foghorn. Pretty cool.
Doesn't this sound like the boating version of the Gabby Petito case?
We really had a nice morning.
According to Brian, they had a nice morning. Quite a different story from what Gabby was talking about.
This is a rough morning.
The guy's name is even Brian in this case.
We're dragging. We should rename the boat to Dragonfly or something.
At around 7:30 p.m., when it was just starting to get dark, they leave that bar to go back to their dinghy boat, which is more like a little blow-up raft, to make their way to their sailboat, which is ironically named the SS Soulmate.
Nothing but fighting since we bought the boat. Then he started turning to insults. So I packed my stuff and left. I'm in Florida visiting parents. I'm okay with it. I feel nothing. It's something I probably should have done 15 years ago. But now I need to find a job. I gave up everything I worked for. There's nothing to fight over. It's scary and exciting at the same time. I'm lucky to have awesome parents who support me, but I'll never marry again. I was warned. He came with too much baggage.
However, that night, they never made it back to their sailboat. According to Brian, it was a bit windy, which caused Lynette to somehow bounce out of their little dinghy boat and into the ocean. This little dinghy raft boat only goes 2 to 3 miles per hour with its small battery-powered engine.
I am heartbroken over the recent boat accident in unpredictable seas and high winds that caused my beloved Lynette to fall from our small dinghy near Elbow Key in the Bahamas. Despite desperate attempts to reach her, the winds and currents drove us further apart. We continue to search for her, and that is my sole focus.
Brian alleges that when his wife Lynette somehow bounced out of this little dinghy boat,
I threw her a flotation cushion that we used to sit on the dinghy, right after she went in. But I couldn't tell if she got it or not.
That's when he threw in one of the seat cushions as a flotation device, but Lynette just kept getting pulled out to sea, even though she's known to be a good swimmer.
Brian claims that Lynette had the keys with her, and then she fell off of the dinghy into the water, and he couldn't save her.
What was the last thing that you remember saying to each other?
Without going into a lot of details because of the ongoing investigation, I will always think there was something I could have done differently.
And Brian claims that Lynette somehow had the keys to the dinghy boat when she fell into the ocean, making it impossible for him to navigate the dinghy to Lynette to save her from the water. So he had no choice but to paddle their little dinghy to shore to get help there.
He paddled for hours to get to shore himself.
A boatyard security guard in Marsh Harbor telling Fox News he spoke with Hooker after he washed ashore, saying he was more exhausted than anything else. He wanted water to drink. The worker reportedly asking, "So where is the lady?" Hooker responding, "She's in the water."
When Brian finally makes it to shore Sunday morning in Marsh Harbor, he asks for help to look for his supposed soulmate beloved wife, Lynette, and now they curiously cannot find her, which of course many believe it was not just a sad unfortunate event, but was also murder. That's what supposedly happened, but now let's break down the evidence. Brian and Lynette were allegedly drinking that evening, and they would reportedly have marital problems when they would drink.
The relationship has been rocky and it gets worse when they drink, so I'm just concerned that he made threats in the past, so I'm just trying to make sure that his anger didn't overtake him and he's done something that he can't undo. They were sober for about 1.5 years because they knew the problems that happen when they drink. So now that it's happening more, I'm just concerned that something did happen.
Where at least one time Brian allegedly got physically violent with Lynette, according to Brian's stepdaughter, Carly.
I have heard from other friends from hers that she stated that it's not safe to be with him because when he gets angry, he can get scary and violent. I haven't seen him like full force hit anybody, but he does go for the neck and chokes. There's history of him choking her out and threatening to throw her overboard. The fact that this is actually happening makes me believe there's more to the story.
Yeah, it's quite odd that Lynette would fall into the water in the first place. They were only going 2 to 3 miles per hour.
On the back of that dinghy is a very small engine. It almost looks like it's a 2 or 4 horsepower. Do you know anything about that engine?
It's an electric engine. It goes only a couple knots.
Heading upriver on our electric dinghy.
Very slow. Not the kind of thing that you would bounce around. Did he at some point say that your mom had bounced out of the dinghy?
Yes, he did say that.
Did he describe that any other way? Like, is there any more description to what he said?
Nope.
Have you ever seen anybody bounce out of that dinghy at the slow speed that it goes?
No.
Even though there was some wind, 25-mile-an-hour wind seems quite normal at sea.
I just know it was about 20 miles per hour winds, and it was about 3 knots the tide was.
But not roiling seas and rain and thunder and lightning. It wasn't a storm of any kind.
Yeah, no. I don't believe they would go out in a storm like that anyways.
There was no thunderstorm with rain. This was not a tropical storm. It was just a little breezy. There was no known history of Lynette ever falling out of the dingy little raft boat, and they've been doing this full time for over 5 years. They are by no means rookies at boating.
Brian climbs the mast to install lazy jacks for our safety. I sewed some umbrella together to enclose our cockpit.
They were living on the Soulmate yacht.
Yeah.
A 55-foot yacht?
Something around there, yeah.
Did they sell their belongings back at home?
Yep.
Also, even if she fell out, she could just swim back and climb back into the dingy little raft to safety because, according to Lynette's daughter, Carly, her mom could swim quite well.
She's a strong swimmer, right?
Yes.
As is he. I think I saw that he's a Marine.
Yes.
Just doesn't add up. My mom is very fit and strong. She's a good swimmer. This story just does not make sense to me.
Brian reportedly claims that Lynette fell out of the dinghy with the keys to the dinghy.
Yep, grocery time.
Delivery. It's a way of life, man.
However, here's the problem. She was never known to pilot the dinghy. Brian would reportedly always pilot the dinghy when they would go out in the dinghy together.
Every time I drove with them, she never drives the dinghy. It's always Brian.
Does it strike you as unusual that Lynette would go into the water with the keys to the dinghy?
Yeah, that seems a little weird. Doesn't really make sense why she would have them. She never drives the boat. It's always Brian driving the boat. And he's like a pretty big guy, so he's like in front of the key basically. So she would have to reach over him, and it just doesn't add up.
Also, the dinghy's keys can be attached to someone similar to a jet ski.
On a little string. It goes on like almost like a jet ski would, but it just clicks in with a little string dangling from it. I've never seen anyone wrap it around their wrist, so I'm not really sure how she got it. She would have to really... I don't understand how someone could grab onto it when they're in the middle of falling.
In the past, they were never known to clip the keys to their body in any way to make sure the keys are always with them. So if one of them falls into the ocean, the keys go with them. In this case, because they never clipped the keys to themselves and they weren't known to do that, if any of them fell into the ocean, the dinghy's keys would be stolen the dinghy. Therefore, what we know about the couple and their habits and what they've done in the past, as of what we know right now, it would make absolutely no sense for Lynette to have the keys to the dinghy. So therefore, if Lynette went overboard, there is no indication that the keys would have went with her. Currently, there's very little indication that Brian tried anything significant at all to save Lynette when she went into the water. You would think if you have the boat and your partner just happened to go into the water for whatever reason, instead of paddling manually back to shore, you would paddle manually back to the person who just fell into the water.
He said that she was floating away, so he threw a life device at her. And then he started swimming or paddling to shore. That's the first thing I would have done, is go towards her, not away from her.
It makes no sense.
The wind blew me away from her, and she swam to the sailboat, and we lost sight of each other pretty quickly.
Why would she be swimming away from the boat? Why wouldn't she be swimming towards the dinghy?
Hooker initially told investigators Lynette fell off their dinghy in bad weather and that strong currents carried her away. He made no mention of the sailboat.
I did find it interesting. He said, though, that she was swimming back in the direction of the boat. That's the first time that we heard that.
Brian has given inconsistent stories where he mentioned in a Facebook message that their sailboat was nearby when Lynette somehow bounced out of their dinghy. So instead of getting aboard his sailboat to radio for help.
And I don't know why he didn't go to his boat and call on the radio to other sailboats. Hey, have you seen my wife? She's missing, because I know boaters would probably go out and help look.
And use additional rescue devices that were surely on board their sailboat. He oddly apparently decides to manually paddle his little dinghy raft many miles, taking many hours to finally get ashore. Brian allegedly has quite a lengthy history of domestic violence, according to his stepdaughter, Carly.
Can you tell me what you saw with Brian and his daughter?
They were talking about something religious, because she's super religious and he's an atheist, and she ran off, and then he followed her and grabbed her by the neck and was like, "Say yes, sir," to her in her face. And then we had to go to court for that, and I was a witness.
How old was she?
Like around 12. I was in 3rd grade.
Now listen to how Carly describes the conversation she had with her stepfather, Brian, and see what you think.
He called me. It was about 8:30 at night on Sunday, and he told me, "Hey, your mom's missing. It happened late last night, but we're going to come up soon, so I hope to see you." And I was just like, okay. Like, I didn't say much because I was like, what? And then he was like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm gonna search for her, bye," and then got off the phone quick.
Yes, very odd and lacking the true emotional concern that anyone would naturally feel if their soulmate was currently lost in the ocean without a boat. Psychologically, this is typical of someone who is emotionally detached from their so-called soulmate. A person who is truly emotionally attached to someone they loved and cared for would sound and act emotionally wrecked.
Our mom is our heart and our home.
However, do you know why many of the perpetrators don't act that way? Right, first, it's because they don't feel emotionally sad that their so-called loved one is gone.
Does your wife go to that swimming pool often, or
it just depends. I mean, on a hot day like this, I would say no.
Yeah, okay, Chris, because people go to outdoor pools on cold days. He's just making excuses so he doesn't have to walk outside on a hot August day.
Or if the perpetrator tries to act extremely sad, emotional, and distraught, it often comes across as extremely fake. Because a person must be an experienced and talented actor to get people to believe it, otherwise they just come across as obviously fake.
Then I saw the black shoes. The goddamn black shoes!
Which the perpetrators in these types of crimes typically come to their senses that they're not going to get anyone to believe their fake emotion.
I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring it back.
That's why we have perpetrators like Chris Watts who don't even try to show any emotion until they absolutely have to when the interrogator calls them out on it, and then they fake emotion on the spot, and it usually comes across as quite fake.
You have not shed one tear in 2 days that you've been here.
No.
Not one. And help me understand that, because I don't get it. These are your baby girls. And you have not shed one tear over them not being around. I lose my 4-year-old in the store for 10 seconds and I start to go panic. Panic. Help me understand that.
I love those girls. I would never do any of this because I haven't shed a tear. Like, you
Yeah, no, that's weird. Is that weird?
Don't look into that.
Hello, honey. I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue, and they have found a flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard, and so they haven't found her yet, but they can now focus all of their efforts in a smaller area, and they're still out there searching today. So I just wanted to update you and let you know.
When he told me about my mom missing, he didn't have much emotion when he told me. It was very monotone and, hey, this happened, but now this voicemail seemed like he had a little bit more like urgency and emotion towards it.
Didn't seem like there was much emotion in this voicemail message. Imagine even having less emotion in the first phone call. Based on piecing together the evidence, it appears that they were drinking and got into another couple's fight.
Yeah, I do believe they were drinking. They drink every time they're out at a bar. So I do believe that they were drinking. They get into fights more often when they drink, and I guess lately they've been drinking more. So I'm just concerned that something happened that can't be undone. Drinking is not really good for my family, it seems, so I just wish it never started again.
Their fight may have continued on the dinghy when they were out at sea alone together.
They've talked about separating before, and the last time they were together, he did choke her out and threaten to kill her and throw her overboard. So the fact that this is happening 2 years later is a little bit like, how can we not be suspicious when you've already said that this was going to happen?
Do you have that picture of your mom with bruises?
No, I don't.
Who has that picture?
One of her friends in Jackson.
How many times has she left him?
I know for sure of 2 times. One when I was in high school and one 2 years ago, just when he choked her out. That's what made her leave last time.
Brian said he went upstairs to calm Lynette down, and that is when Lynette hit him 4 to 5 times in the face, he claimed. Now, Lynette's side of the story was very different. Police say she was highly intoxicated. She claimed that Brian struck her in the forehead. She also accused him of choking her and punching her once. Police said that Brian had visible injuries of a bloody and swollen nose. Police said that Lynette did not have any visible injuries. But Lynette was arrested and brought to the Kent County Jail, where she was lodged on a domestic assault charge. The charges were later dropped, though, because authorities said there was no way to prove who started the assault.
Brian allegedly has a history of going for the neck. Therefore, the fight between Lynette and Brian may have gotten physical, where he may have sadly incapacitated Lynette and pushed her out of the dinghy and into the ocean.
I feared that he would hurt her in some way, but I never would have thought that this would have happened. There's history of him choking her out and threatening to throw her overboard.
Then may have psychologically realized he needs to make it appear he had no ability to scoop her out of the water by piloting the dinghy over to Lynette. Throws the dinghy's keys into the ocean, giving him the excuse that he had no other choice but to manually paddle his dinghy back to shore alone.
I believe he has a bunch of anger he hasn't processed. I've seen him choke out one of his daughters before, and we had to go to court for that. So he's just repeating patterns.
However, law enforcement really needs to confirm the last known proof of life for Lynette, whether that's witnesses at the Abaco Inn or video surveillance footage, because taking the word of the possible perpetrator is not reputable, since he could be fabricating a scenario to get search and recovery looking in the wrong place.
Found a flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard. They can now focus all of their efforts in a smaller area.
For example, if this was a murder and not just an unfortunate circumstance, maybe she was buried on shore and staged this whole event to divert authorities to look at sea instead of on shore, since most know that once a body is found, the investigation becomes much more focused, and evidence starts closing in around the person responsible.
He's detained on land at a hotel that he was staying in with his sister. In the presence of his sister, he's taken into custody, and then they tell him, look, we're going to take you to your boat so that you can get some clothing because you're going to be detained for some time. They take him to his boat. He is handcuffed. And then in that process is when he falls into the water, having to be rescued by the same officers that just detained him.
He was submerged in the cold water and took in a significant amount of seawater before his life jacket brought him to the surface. He had to be rescued from the water by the police. As a result of this fall, Brian sustained an injury to his knee, which has caused him to limp, as well as a visible abrasion.
When Brian was getting his clothes from his sailboat with law enforcement, he oddly fell into the water, injuring his knee quite badly and almost drowned. Do you know why he seemed to intentionally do that?
The seas were rough, and when he was taken into custody, that same evening he was taken by boat to his vessel by police officers, and while in custody, he fell overboard and had to be rescued because of the same rough condition on the ocean.
Yes, possibly to make it appear to law enforcement and in court that weather conditions around that time that Lynette went missing were conducive to someone falling out of a boat, making what happened to Lynette appear more probable to a jury.
I think either she did actually fall off and he just was like, oh, well, look at all that life insurance and just paddled away, or he pushed her out and she was unconscious or something. I don't know.
Police in the Bahamas releasing Brian Hooker from custody without charging him in the disappearance of his wife, Lynette. He claims his wife fell overboard with boat keys in her pocket in the middle of the open water.
Cascade of failures, and there's something I'm never going to forget myself. We stayed too long. We left too dark. All kinds of dinghy came over with her because it wasn't clipped to anything or anybody. The wind blew us apart so fast that I think she tried to swim back to the sailboat. To her, I lost the oar, and I threw the anchor out and anchored the dinghy, and I yelled. I couldn't see her anymore. Can't really explain it. You know, I just know that I hate this boat.
Did police ever explicitly ask you if you hurt your wife?
Of course.
What did you say to them?
I said I've never harmed Lynette, and I never would harm Lynette, and I want to find Lynette.
Remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now in the comments, what do you think sadly happened to Lynette? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. Instead of van life like we had with Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito, we now have boating life with Brian and Lynette Hooker. Spending 24/7, 365 with anybody cannot possibly be good for any relationship, especially a relationship that has been known to have some domestic violence issues. See you next time.